Hi everyone, and welcome back to Art with Mrs. S. Today we're going to be finishing up our Tints and Shades project that we painted last week. And it should be dry. You might notice that it curls up a little bit, so when we're working today, if it helps you to tape down or weight down your edges so that it's not curling up, we can help you with that. When we get going today, you're going to want to draw first, and I'm going to recommend that you use a pencil. I have mine here too. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see it, so I also brought my marker. If you've ever drawn with marker on top of dried paint, it can dry out your marker really quickly, and I don't want you to waste or lose the markers. So we're going to get started drawing here. We're going to draw a silhouette or kind of a shadow of a tree, and then if we have time, we'll also draw in a fence. We're going to go ahead and get started, so make sure you have something to draw with. And I'm going to draw directly on top of my painting. If you haven't had practice drawing trees, it's kind of the motto to always draw up and out. So let's go ahead and start with that trunk of our tree. I'm going to kind of start towards the bottom. And my trunk, I'm going to draw up. If you don't want it perfectly vertical, you can make it more of a bumpy tree. I'm going to draw the other side of my trunk going up. And now that I have that kind of nice foundation, now I'm going to start branching out my tree. And again, that motto of going up. So I'm always kind of going upwards and out. And my branches have this thickness to them, so I've got to keep that width there. And then I can kind of keep going up and out with those branches. I'm keeping in mind that I have to paint this, so I'm not going to do any itty-bitty details. I want to keep them pretty wide so that when I'm using a brush, I don't get frustrated. And then I can maybe come back over and go up and out on this opposite side. Yours will not look exactly like mine, so kind of start getting that out of your head now. Maybe you draw yours a little differently. Maybe you have more of a style. Maybe your branches are sharper. Maybe they're bumpier. Maybe they're more sketched. Your tree won't look like mine. I'm kind of being mindful, not only am I going to paint this, but I don't want to cover up that nice light tint there in the middle of my paper. And I also did my tree off center. I'm going up and out. You can kind of draw your branches to a point. I'm not going to be drawing leaves on here today. I have kind of this bare spot over here. You can always keep adding those up and outs if it doesn't quite look right. Ups and out. And when you go to paint too, you can always add extra things that you may not have liked or didn't see in your creation. So there's my tree. If I want to go ahead and add in a fence, I'm going to do that towards the bottom, and it doesn't really matter how detailed my fence is, because when I paint this, it's all going to be black. So I draw kind of that thickness, those two horizontal lines going side to side, and then I can add in my fence boards going up and down vertical. I don't need to worry about where those intersect there. These could go flat. You could have them come up to a sharp point. It's not going to make too much difference, but try to incorporate your own style and what's important to you. I'm kind of keeping away from where these touch, because when I paint, I don't want those two together because it'll be black against black. If you drew your fence shorter or taller, not a huge deal. Now, when my drawing is done, I got my tree, I have some outline of a fence towards the bottom. I'm going to start painting. You're going to want a brush that's kind of thin and comes to a point, especially with these little details in the fence and along those tiny branches or twigs that stick out. I'm also going to need something like a palette with black paint on it. If you like to use water, you can use water to help thin it out. But the paint I'm using is tempera paint, and it doesn't really need thinned out. I'm going to start painting inside of my pencil marks. Black should cover up those purple lines that you created, those shades, very easily. If your shade of purple, the purple plus black, is super dark and it looks very black. This will just kind of blend into it. So hopefully you did your tree large enough or tall enough so that you can still see your tree. Notice I'm kind of globbing it on, and now I'm going back and thinning out and smoothing out those kind of puddles or blobs of black paint. Just like when I paint with watercolor, I need to dip my brush often. I don't want these scratchy lines today. I want them nice and smooth. I'm going right along that edge. If you get those kind of bumps, I need to go back over it and smooth it out. How you hold your brush makes a huge impact or difference. I'm not smashing it down. I'm very gently smoothing it out along the path of these branches. When it gets smaller, I do still want a lot of paint on my brush, but now I'm holding it more upright. I'm not flattening those bristles. I'm getting those nice little details on the end. Those get a little bumpy. I need to get more paint on there and then barely touch and have that brush coming to a fine point just like you would with your pencil. I'm going to keep going, keep going, keep going. Try to work quickly, but not so quickly that you're slopping paint down. Just quick enough that I can smooth out those big blobs of paint before they start to dry. And I started my trunk and I'm working up and out. I'm being mindful of where my shirt's pressing against my art or where my hand is at. I'm holding it kind of more upright than you would a pencil so that I'm not laying my hand in my artwork. You'll notice I also am saving the bottom fence for last because a lot of the times my hand is laying in that part of my art. If you get those little dots to the side, don't worry about them. It'll be alright. Sometimes I can start small and go bigger if it helps you. As long as you worked in pencil when this dries, you can go back and use your eraser and clean up those pencil marks. I was pressing very hard today so you could see my lines, but it might be beneficial for you to press very lightly. I can add in extra smaller branches as I'm working too. Maybe I see an area that I didn't add a lot of those little ones in. I can take my brush and add those. More of a artistic preference. You don't have to do that. Always going bigger to smaller. If you have a branch that you don't want to include, again, you can erase it later. Don't try to do it while you have wet paint on your paper. I'm almost done with my branches, and I'll be working on my fence posts next. And I save those so I'm not laying my hand in my art. You'll notice this paint dries very quickly as it gets soaked into those other dried areas of paint. I'm on my last branch. Smaller to bigger on those areas. And now I have my tree. It looks like it's kind of silhouetting in the moonlight. And now on these fence posts, I kept mine very rectangular. So to get those sharp edges, my brush is going to help me out the most. If you get a little bit on your space that you're working on, no big deal. I like to keep that piece of paper underneath my art. So if I do go off the paper or the edge, alright. I am drawing my fence post all the way down to the edge of my paper because I don't need a floating fence. I want this scene to look like it's almost tilted upwards, or the moon's looking down and casting kind of that eerie shadow, or that silhouette, you'll hear me say. If they get less sharp, less rectangular, kind of go with it. You can very carefully get into those edges. I can turn my brush up and down and left to right to help square those off. If your tape's in the way, I wouldn't worry about it too much. We can touch that up later. I would leave it so that you're not smashing your art or accidentally folding it upwards and then suddenly you have wet paint sandwich. once you start painting, it's hard to undo these things. Don't try to grab paper towel and wipe off an area. So you gotta wait for it to dry before we can fix it. If you make a mistake, save it. We'll fix it when it dries. So I did those up and down, those vertical posts first, and now I'm going to take my brush and go left to right, trying to keep those cleaned up. Smooth edges, dipping my small brush often. Don't really need to go through that tree, so now I'm going to have this next area touching the tree. All the way next to the edge of my paper again. All the way across. And I'm done. Once you get all finished, don't keep going, don't overdo it. Make sure you put it in an area to dry. We use our nice drying rack at school. And then don't forget to post a picture of you with your art, and post a Padlet with your first and last name and classroom teacher. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you had fun.